segment, our guest is Alex Jershevsky, founding and managing partner at Recovery Partners, no stranger to troubled situations. Not of his making, I stress. So what was the most alarming thing about Spain today? What was the big catalyst for the sell-off?
Well, that's just it, the sell-off. You see, now we're getting to a point in this ongoing crisis. It's a rolling crisis where the markets are no longer reacting positively to these, rabbit out of the hat announcements that we've done this now, we've done that now, and now we've actually passed the bailout package for Spain, and it's all going to happen. The markets blew off down the board in Europe. I mean, there was no stock market that was down less than 1% in Europe. Mm-hmm. Spanish stock market was off almost 6%. The euro's blown down to a very serious low against sterling and some of the other currencies, against the U.S. dollar. It's looking weak. This is not good. This is not good. It looks like these rabbit tricks are wearing off in terms of their effectiveness on market sentiment.
So you and other observers say, enough, governments have to take firm action here. What can they do?
Well, it's what we've been saying for some time. I think you need to have a reckoning and write down of all these bad debts. And, once you bottom out the situation and see where all the bad debts are, you see what problems need to be addressed, then you can start to define how much resources will be needed to solve those problems. What's happened to date is they've taken huge resources and they've simply thrown it at the problem without a plan in mind. It's these, macro patches. But what you have really are micro problems relating to the security positions on bank balance sheets. And we know that a big chunk of that problem is the mark-to-market losses banks are carrying on their sovereign debt portfolios. And many, many banks in Europe are functionally insolvent. And that remains the problem, and that's why financial markets continue to seize up. That's the issue. And there hasn't been this reckoning and write-down. And until we get that, we're not going to be able to get out of this.
Is it time to just recapitalize the European banks, put all kinds of new equity in there?
Yeah. But there seems to be tremendous resistance on the part of the banks to accept these write-downs. Their whole strategy has been to try and force this onto the taxpayer of the various countries. And as I mentioned prior to the show, I mean, this is unique in terms of it's the first time in history this has actually happened. We've never had this kind of a scenario before where the taxpayers are being asked to shoulder huge bad outcomes from huge private sector risk-taking.
Once again in Spain, it seems that the senior lenders to the banks are being protected. What is that all about? Why don't they have to suffer?
Well, this is part of it. This is part of it. I mean, nobody wants to take the chop. And we know that if the banks take their write-downs, that the bonds they've issued to investors are going to be subject to write-down, and there'll be a cascading effect. But at the end of the day, that's what capitalism is about. There are winners and there are losers. And if we keep the losers afloat, it comes at the expense of the folks who've kept their house in order. And, those losers can't hire people, they can't innovate, they can't make new investments. They become zombies sucking off the healthier parts of the economy. It's like having cancer and not treating it.
So what's the catalyst that's actually going to, I hear what you're saying and what needs to happen, but what's preventing that from happening? Although Andy talked about the senior bankers being protected, but what's going to cause things to change?
I think there'll be, we're in a situation now where the policy steps that have been taken over the last 3, 4, 5 years in addressing the financial crisis have restricted future policy flexibility. The expansion of bank balance sheets, of central bank balance sheets enormously, that's constrained their future ability to act. At the same time, these policy moves have increased the probability of new black swans happening. So the answer to that is that you really don't know, because we've opened ourselves to all kinds of unexpected events. And second-order effects that we can only imagine.
So this is a dumb question, but what are those what could be an unexpected effect? I mean, I know the fact it's unexpected, you don't know. But
you've got a situation where you forced the payment burden onto populations. You've got huge demonstrations in Spain yesterday, 300,000 people on the street. You've got a situation in Greece that is still extremely unsettled.
So social, political, these
social, political upheaval. Yeah. You could have some of these economies turn into a total mess. Mm-hmm. And the possibility of some type of severe social upheaval is not that far off. For example, in Greece, some of the opinion polls suggest that more than half of Greece expects an armed revolution to occur there. I mean, these aren't... these aren't small things. I mean, if something like that happens, I mean, that could turn the whole political order in Europe on its head, and it could distract folks for many, many years and cause the economy to underperform for many, many years. And that, those effects, as they cascade through, could affect other economies, including ours. So.
New Zealand, about 20 years ago, went through its own debt crisis. And they abolished farm subsidies, stuff like that. You were involved. You were in New Zealand.
Well, I was there. I got there. I was actually running the debt management office for a period of time as we were climbing out of that mess.
So what did you learn?
Well, the benefit there was that not everybody was in the mess at the same time. The benefit there was that there was tremendous political cohesion around the idea of getting the debt problem under control. Whether you were in the Labour Party or the National Party or the Maori Party, everybody agreed on fixing the debt problem. So there wasn't this discussion about austerity versus growth, which is really it's a red herring. Yeah. I mean, what they should be talking about in Europe is not austerity growth. They should be talking austerity or growth or restructuring. They should shoot for restructuring, which is what they did in New Zealand. And as part of that restructuring in New Zealand, they had to remodel their economy. They got rid of a lot of inefficient parts of the economy, the subsidies, as you mentioned. Bloated state sector enterprises were sold off. And the economy crawled out after, 7, 8 years in the tank. It crawled out of its muck. And when I got there, the credit rating was single A minus. And when I left there, 3 years later, we had a AAA credit rating. Because we paid down debt, because we adopted responsible fiscal policies, because we had a proactive approach to the investors that were buying our bonds. None of this features in any of the restructuring programs that the IMF and the ECB have been pushing on these countries. In fact, Greece, now that it's accepted the bailout, Portugal, that it's accepted the bailout, Ireland, these guys no longer have an independent borrowing program. They're handmaidens of the IMF. They have to serve at their beck and call. They don't have an independent investor base. Mm-hmm. They've just got all this super sovereign debt that's been stuffed into them, and they have to live with that. So they don't have the ability to actually crawl out of it by themselves. They need these other guys, these bureaucrats in Washington, to help them out. And the folks in Washington don't have any kind of track record whatsoever in saving anybody. Yeah. Like, just put it under the microscope. They don't have a track record in this business. In fact, until this crisis hit, the IMF wasn't even in the debt restructuring business. It's a huge illusion that the market seemed to have that this was what the IMF is about. It's not. What they've been doing in this and what the ECB have been doing are completely outside of the agreed articles that those institutions were founded on. The IMF was set up to help smooth out balance of payments problems for small countries. It was a sister institution to the World Bank that was designed to put long-term development finance into small countries, developing countries after the Second World War. And the IMF was set up to help them with balance of payments crises. They have no role in debt crises. They have no bailout role. I mean, this has all been jacked up over the last couple of years because there's guys that don't have a solution, and they're being pressured by bankers that don't want to take the chop.
On that, we'll have to leave it. Alex Jershevsky, founder and managing partner, Recovery Partners.